Welcome to this live version of Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Today we have with us Jessica Newell, and she's with the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and she's our archivist. And we had a very interesting conversation that some of you may have seen that was part of our Congress just a few weeks ago. And so we're going to pick up from there and continue with these themes that are coming out that are very, very interesting. Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for coming again to have a conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So how is it, what's going on in the archives? Is there anything, where should we start our conversation? I have a lot of questions to ask you. I'd like to give you just an opening moment to see what we might springboard off of.
Sure. Well, right now I am still working on the readings collection, and so rehousing those, making sure everything is in archival quality storage, because the readings are on really, really fragile paper, and so one of my main priorities coming here is making sure that all those are stable and safe. And so we're doing a lot of processing, and we're also kind of exploring more of the digital realm of the archive. We started a YouTube channel a few months ago that's been really fun to do.
Yes,
and
I've seen that.
yeah,
It's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be sharing all these really interesting stories and tidbits of things that I come across when I'm working the archive and being able to share it with people.
Yeah, in my time here at A.R.E, the archives has never really had a spokesperson, or it's never really had a public face. So it's great that that with your coming on board, so it's almost like people are getting a view of what's kind of the records of Edgar Cayce and the interesting story that's there. But one of the things I've learned since our last conversation was that you've done, as you've gone through the readings, you've done a little bit of, or maybe a lot of kind of study or come to a closer understanding of Gladys. And so I'd like to ask you some questions about that. What have you gleaned about Gladys from reading her notes or reading her records? What's come to you from that experience?
Well, Gladys really, she kind of helps me every single day in the archive. So we know that she did the indexing project. She was ahead of that, and started in 1947 up until 1971. But she also handwrote cross-references, follow-up information, dates. So really almost every single piece of paper that I come across, it has her notes in red ink in the margin somewhere towards the bottom.
Does she have really nice handwriting? Is it easy to read?
It is.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. So what's really impressed me too, getting to process her collection, actually, we have 27 boxes worth of her personal papers as well that have never been digitized or really processed at all. And so she was a really interesting person. She loved creative writing. I have several articles and essays and short stories that she wrote. She wrote an essay about Edgar in 1949 and submitted it to the Princess Anne County Fair here in Virginia
and
Beach.
did it get accepted?
Yeah, she won third prize actually. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and learning a lot more about her husband Al Turner and her second husband Leslie Wilmore. They were both A.R.E members in the 60s and 70s, so getting to learn more about her, not just in her role as stenographer for Edgar Cayce, but actually the different facets of her life and her personality. So that's been really cool.
Oh, that is cool. I remember from studying a little bit about her story. I remember it seemed like that while Edgar Cayce was alive, it seemed like there was such a focus on being the secretary or being the transcriptionist.
Right.
And I remember reading a reading where it's almost like she was a young woman at that time, and it was almost like she was sacrificing something of a personal life because she had such a mission with Edgar Cayce. And I remember one of the readings said, it's almost like you're walking in the footsteps of the one that came to serve and not be served. And so it seemed to me that there was an aspect of her personal life that she kind of deferred while Mr. Cayce was alive and giving readings. And it seemed like after he passed away, it's like she got to be more of a balanced kind of person. It seems like after that's when she got married and pursued a personal life. Is that anything you could add about that, or does that resonate with what you've kind of gleaned from?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. I mean, she lived with the Cayces for that whole 10 years she was employed by them. And it wasn't just doing, the secretarial work. She was looking after Edgar Evans when he was younger. She was helping Gertrude Cayce keep the household running. She has
it's
so
almost
many
like a daughter.
And I think they definitely considered her to be, an adoptive daughter in a way. And so after 1945, she actually moved out of the house at Arctic Crescent. Louise Chisholm, who was a member at that time, bought her a plot of land as a Christmas present.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she
That's
bought
a nice Christmas present.
Yeah, and so she built her own house on it. It was down the block from the Cayce's house.
Oh.
And we have photos of the house when it was completed in
Yeah.
1952. So these lovely color photos of Gladys, like with her rose garden and the new yard and the house and everything. And
Oh, wow.
yeah.
That's really, really special. Now, did she ever talk about her past lives with Edgar Cayce? Because I know that there's that famous Rata life where she had been a daughter, kind of an illegitimate daughter of the dancer, which was Gertrude. So she had been a daughter of Gertrude and Edgar Cayce in this past life, but I guess she died young. She died at 10 or 11. And it always seemed like she kind of picked up, she got to be their daughter in this life. In a way something had gotten interrupted. Did she speak about that at all? Is there any reference to kind of the reincarnation or some of was she into the metaphysical stuff of the readings?
I'm not sure actually.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff I see, it's very business oriented, A.R.E. oriented, very organization wise. It's really interesting.
So she kept a professional demeanor. It was almost like when she was working as the archivist, it was just like nothing but the facts. And then who knows, maybe in the background she was working with all those other matters.
Yeah, there's a lot of correspondence between Gladys and Hewland and May St. Clair. A lot of the staff that were there in the late 40s and trying to figure out what were they going to do after the war. Is A.R.E. still going to go on, like once Edgar was gone? Because a lot of members were kind of, going back and forth. If Edgar's not here to give readings, what is our mission? So we have, tons and tons of letters, and when they're hashing that all out and seeing what the future is going to be, so it's really interesting to see where everyone's coming from.
Yeah, it's as you may know, I portray Edgar Cayce every so often in a show. It's called Evening with Edgar Cayce, and I've tried to do a little bit of like reading his letters, like the book of his letters, to try to get a sense of his person. And one of the most complex times, I guess there's many of them, but the time where he had the hospital, and then the hospital had to close, and his feeling of like entering almost like a depression, his feeling of loss, like that hospital was his big dream. And I understand he moved not far from here. So I don't know if what I heard is that he was across the street. Maybe that's a legend, but that he got to see this hospital not be what it was intended for. And I've always wondered, or it seemed that while he was in his depression, it was almost like Gladys and Gertrude, they had to keep things going. And it seemed like in that time was where Gladys and Gertrude reached out, and that became the inception of the A.R.E. Is that at all kind of supported? Is that supported by what you've learned?
Yeah, I've definitely read letters in the collection from that time period. Gladys, writing letters to David Kahn, to a lot of the really prominent A&I members, Association of National Investigators, which preceded A.R.E.
Yes.
And so she'd be writing like, I don't want you to tell Edgar that I wrote you, but we have to keep this together. a lot of times she was asking about material support. She was saying Edgar can't give readings if he's worried about
Yeah.
when the next house payment is
Yeah.
going to be. So really, really serious real world
Yeah.
issues there.
Yeah, I remember this one story. I think it was in Hugh Lynn's biography, or maybe it was one of his lectures, where he came home from college or something, and he went to hug his dad, and his dad kind of crunched, and he
Yeah.
realized his father was wearing newspaper under his suit because they had no heat in the house.
That was when they had moved up to Dayton, Ohio, and so Hewlin was still in the middle of school at the time, and so Hewlin stayed in Selma with some friends of the family, so he could finish out the semester, and so that was kind of like the Christmas break kind of time of years that he took the train up to Dayton to reunite the family. And
Yeah.
that's where that
And that's
story
where
is from.
he's heard his dad crunching. Yeah, I think that's such a poignant, it's example of Mr. Casey's kind of personhood. Who he could have certainly made a lot of money if that had been an ideal of his, but it so wasn't. It was so much of service, and in a way, I think he needed people like Gladys or people to take care of him, to support him, to kind of realize that you have to eat, you have to have money for rent, you have to have pay bills, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, what other, how long have you been here now with the archives?
I've been here since May of 2018.
Oh, okay,
So about
good.
2
So
years.
just a couple years.
Yeah.
And in your time, is there anything that's particularly stood out to you that you could share as you've just researched something that has impressed you that might be interesting to share, or that you can share?
There's so many things. When I came here, I knew like the reading's my the top priority, but I also need to get to know the archive and get a better idea of all the different collections. So I kind of went through and worked on smaller collections. I worked on the family collection. So we have material in the Casey family papers. The oldest, I think, is a daguerreotype of his grandmother from 1855. And so I really, as the archivist, you need to get to know like the people, for lack of a better word, living in your archive. Like you need to know everyone.
They kind of personify him.
Yeah. So you'll be able to help people research as much as possible. So I really have spent my first few years here getting to know the collection. Hewlin's papers have been really interesting. They span mostly mid to late 20th century, and I found it really interesting that a lot of the letters are from people writing to him, talking about their psychic experiences and how to meditate and stuff like that. He was like the person to go to for advice in this kind of
I can
realm.
imagine. There was no one else to talk about these
Yeah.
kind of things, so it was a safe place.
And no matter how far out it seems, the question, he would always give an answer, something constructive, something for them
Yeah, that
to
sounds
try,
like him.
or a book to read, or something like
Yeah.
that. And he was just so interested in everything, in paranormal investigation and that sort of thing. And he wrote a lot about Hoff's experiences in Venture Inward. She published in 1964. So, it's such a great way, when you look at his papers, it's basically a history of the New Age movement in the 20th century,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah, that's what I've sensed too, is that I think that a lot of folks don't understand or realize how Edgar Casey, and probably the Theosophists and Madame Blavatsky, were really the initiators of the whole
definitely.
New Age movement. Now, one of the things I found fascinating last time we chatted was that you were telling us that there's going to come, that a new biography is coming out about Edgar Casey. Where's that at? What can you share about that?
Yeah, so I've been working with Dr. Michael Davis. He's a professor of history over at Hampton University, so just across the tunnel. And he contacted me about a year ago, and he's working on a scholarly biography of Edgar Casey. It's going to be published by the University of Alabama Press, probably within the next 1 to 2 years. And so it's been great to have him researching the archive and get a new perspective from someone, not a believer in the work necessarily, but he believes in the value of it and its importance.
Yeah, there's probably not been any biography that's written in that context. Most of them, maybe they started off as skeptical, but let's say like Harmon Brough, he became an apostle.
Yeah.
So his biographies are from that vantage point. I think he talks about his process, but you're right, that would be a great addition to the kind of the record of Edgar Cayce.
Yeah, and he's coming with it with so much sincerity and just curiosity, and I'm really excited to see how he's going to.
That's great. So I think that's really something to look forward to. Has he put a working title, or is it too early?
It's a little too early, yeah.
Does that jinx the project?
But a little too early. But we are also talking about working with the history faculty at the university, maybe in the future, in the next 2 years, maybe getting some interns in to work the archive.
Wow. Oh, nice.
Yeah, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, that's gonna. It sounds like it's really, really gonna grow.
Yeah, that's how I started in archives as an intern, and so if I could help other people kind of find that.
Now, since we're doing this live, we're going to be having some questions. So if you're watching live, go ahead and just in the comment section ask some questions. I'm going to talk a little bit more with Jessica, but shortly we'll start taking your questions if you have any. But I remember another thing we talked about was how you got here. Yeah. I think you had told me that your father knew a little bit about Edgar Cayce, and that so when you applied for this job, you had some sense of who Edgar Cayce was, but you weren't. It's not like you were, I got to go work at A.R.E. I really want to be part of this psychic movement.
Yeah, it was funny. I knew very, very little about Edgar. My research senior year of university was looking at 19th century spiritualists and how they used the kind of philosophy behind spiritualism in progressive movements, in politics. And
oh, I see. So that was your focus in your thesis. Is that yeah? Oh, I see. So I didn't know that. So you had a background or a curiosity about this. Did that come from your family? Was it some influence? Was it your father who had some interest in the New Age movement?
My mom.
Your mom as well?
Had some interest. Yeah. My dad actually saw the job description for this position.
So that's how your dad got involved.
Yeah. The Society of American Archivists runs a job directory, and so he saw that coming down. I was in my last semester of graduate school.
Good old dad wants to help his daughter get a job.
Yeah, trying to figure out what we're going to do after graduation.
Start getting a paycheck. Yeah,
so when I was doing research on my 19th century spiritualists, there were books on Edgar Cayce in the university library, kind of adjacent to that shelf. And so my collection scope, my research scope, was only about from 1840 to 1870s, 1880s.
I see. So Edgar Cayce wasn't
there. So Edgar was
there.
Kind of out.
Yeah.
So I was aware of him.
I see. So you had a pretty good understanding of the antecedent movement before Edgar Cayce. So you kind of see him historically. Oh, I could see how this author that you must be a valuable resource in helping him put the pieces together.
Yeah, it's really funny actually. Because one of the spiritualists I worked with, Andrew Jackson Davis, who was active in the upstate New York area, mid to late 19th century. Edgar actually, studied his books. It seemed to Edgar that Andrew's abilities were the closest to his own. And so we have a small collection of Davis's papers in the archive, and they're mostly letters with his publisher and his wife Delphine. And so it's so funny, I didn't know that collection was there when I first came here. And I, spent a year writing about Davis, and then I get here and I've got archival material related to him, so it was really, really funny.
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. You must get asked too, just, is there anybody out there like Edgar Cayce? And I think of him like a Mozart, doesn't come around that often. Like that kind of a spiritual kind of genius. And as Cayce would say, it's built over lifetimes. But I remember the story of the little prophetess, Faith, and how she had such gifts, such talent, and I guess because of family issues, that ability eventually got suppressed. But I think it helps show that Edgar Cayce was really a jewel, that somehow, he was able to bring this gift into fruition, that it wasn't somehow, his nickname was the Freak, and that play about him. So there must have been a lot of pressure on him to suppress his ability. But somehow it just seems like what a blessing that he didn't, he had somewhat family support and some stability to be able to maintain that that gift that he came in, I guess, to bring forth. So it's always pointed out to me that it's a real vulnerability. I wonder how many of these gifted lights come in and how many are actually survive. It's like, is it 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100? So it helps you understand what a precious jewel it was to have Edgar Cayce, and to be able to, it would have been nice to have had a reading from him, but the next best thing is that the way that the archives have been maintained. Now, another thing I've heard, I don't know if it's an urban legend, so I'm debunking, I'm sorry I'm probably beating you to your question, but what I understood is that before Gladys, of course Edgar Cayce was giving readings, but they weren't keeping copies of the readings. And the estimation is that there may have been about 1,000 or so readings given before Gladys came on board. Does every now and then, is there like a lost reading that comes forward? Somebody says, oh, I found this in Grandma's attic or something, and it seems to be about, what do you guys make of it? Have there been found readings in that sort of way?
Yeah, so before Gladys, it was pretty sporadic record keeping. He had a series of stenographers. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Karen Davis, who also works for ECF, has done fabulous research on tracking down all these different stenographers that worked with Edgar.
I'm trying to see if they kept a record or something like that of their readings.
And know who they are and their life stories, that sort of thing. And so there was also several fires in Edgar's photography studios around the turn of the century.
Yeah, that flash powder.
Yeah. So
and one of those almost blinded Hugh Lynn.
Yeah. So once Gladys got there, she and Gertrude developed, the format that we know is very familiar to the beginning of the reading, and making sure that they were keeping all the copies safe. I have actually found 2 readings that we didn't have cataloged as I've been working through the collection. One was in with the records from Edgar's oil ventures. I have all the correspondence between his partners at that time. And
what a mess that must have been.
Yeah. Maps of the oil fields.
Yeah, I heard it was sabotage, and it's just a bunch of cutthroat.
Yeah,
There's
it was
money
really
involved.
rough.
Yeah. How long was he there? Was it a couple months or a couple years?
Yeah, a couple of years, the early 1920s.
Yeah.
The records I have from that span around 1919 to 1923. So that was when he was actively thinking about that project.
And he was actually living down, was it in Texas?
Yeah, down in San Saba, Texas,
Yeah, what an extended, what a interesting and strange time. I remember the readings seemed to say that if everybody had the same ideal, they could find this mother lode of oil. But I mean, just try to get 2 people together with the same ideal, let alone a whole group of people that are, obviously a lot of them are going to be money oriented. Now, you'll have to forgive me, but I don't want to, I know that probably as a archivist, you don't want to get into speculation or into sensationalism, but I'm going to ask you go where you want with the question. But I get a tremendous amount of questions about a Nikolai Tesla, Edgar Cayce connection. And I remember when I first worked here that a gentleman came who said he was a representative of the Tesla estate. He was from the museum in Bosnia, and he told us that Tesla had left Edgar Cayce several patents in his will. And I remember he went up to meet with Charles Thomas Cayce, and I remember Mariana Theo has, corroborated that story, so it's not like I'm making something up. But I've always wondered, is there any substance, as far as this fantastic story? Is there anything in the archives that supports anything having to do with a Tesla Edgar Cayce connection?
Yeah, unfortunately not. I mean, we don't have.
Darn.
Yeah, we don't.
Can you make one up? No. I'm just
Well,
I found a reading.
I mean, not that I've seen,
Yeah.
and not that I've seen in the previous inventories that I have for all the materials.
Well, what they're doing online is they've somehow found a reading that it mentions Atlantis and technology, and they're ascribing that to the Tesla reading, where apparently it's not. It was for another individual, so there isn't any apparently any Tesla.
Yeah, we don't have
connection or
any
anything.
solid, documentary evidence. If we find some in the future, if something comes out of the
Yeah.
woodwork, that would be fabulous.
There's
but
there's such an interest
there
in a
is,
Tesla Cayce connection. I'll ask one last question about that. So is there any, there's, as far as speculation, I guess you wouldn't want to go there, but is there anything that could point to, I know what I was going to ask. This, as far as these patents, have you heard of anything of that? I just wonder where that went. Like, I wonder where that went from
like
the conversation to actually following up with that. Has
Yeah,
any
the
a letter
origin
been
of
sent
that,
to them?
yeah.
So there's not been any contact? Would you like me to write them a letter for you?
I could definitely. I haven't had any contact with them, but I mean, I can.
Yeah,
I can
think
definitely.
so. I think, but if you want to,
curator.
talk about, I'm sure your time is busy. You want to sensationalize your work. It would be about establishing that that Tesla Cayce connection. One thing I found fascinating from the readings is how Edgar Cayce talked about how electricity is the closest energy to God's energy in the world. So that electrical energy is like God energy. And then you think of Tesla, who's working with electricity so much, and in some ways, I think of it like electricity can be used to kill or it can be used to heal. It's the will of the person. It's almost like our life force. If we think of our life force as the God force, we have free will to use that constructively or destructively. So I always thought that, having read a little bit about Tesla, I know that he suffered from depression, and he used to use electricity on himself to kind of keep his energy up. And if you look at the readings that Cayce gave on depression, it almost sounds like he's saying that it's an electrical malfunction in the body, that from the thought to the action, that electrical impulse doesn't quite make it. And you think of what antidepressants are; they try to increase the ability of the body to transfer electricity. Okay, I'll leave I'll leave that sensational subject to itself. So anything more about what's been, any stories you can tell about just your 2+ years here? Anything that particularly stands out, a person you've met or a conversation that you've had or something that just seems kind of new, or you didn't come to this work really as a woo-woo person. You came here as a serious archivist. Has this work kind of influenced you? Do you feel that you're slowly starting to drink the Kool-Aid of the Cayce work? Or not quite yet? You're not waking up with dreams of past lives or anything like that?
Not those, no. You actually tend, as an archivist, sometimes to have dreams about your collection and the people in it, because when you say you're working with a stack of letters, necessarily you're going to have to read some of them to write your finding aid.
Yeah.
So you have to write who these people are, their story of their lives, how they're all connected. So I've definitely had that sort of experience before. Because we have hundreds of people represented in this archive, and so they all kind of live in your mind now. But I came in definitely with an archivist and historian's perspective on this. And it's actually, this is the most fascinating collection to work on. We've got a really rare collection. We have some, archives of spiritualists in New York and Indiana, and we have some parapsychology, perceptual studies collections in the United States, but we really don't have really anything like this. The volume of material of just one man's work in this field. And so I'm having so much fun here. It's like, it's
Yeah.
never boring.
Yeah.
It's always fascinating.
Yeah, from what
stuff.
I've heard, I've heard that it's quite a large amount of documentation of not just his readings, but the whole community, the whole context that those readings happened in. Do you have any thought or any interest that you might eventually write a book about something you're learning or any of this material?
Yeah, maybe someday. I'm really interested in the effects of World War II on the work. So we know that after Thomas Segru wrote "There's a River" in '42, and Marguerite Bro wrote her article in the Coronet the following year,
Yeah.
the volume of letters they were getting, the post office here in Virginia Beach actually refused to send letters to the Caseys once the volume reached that.
So they would have to go and pick them up at the
So
mail.
Gertrude actually would drive the car. She was the one that drove their Chevrolet to the post office
and pick up these sacks
pick
of
up
mail.
sacks of letters and bring them. And so we'd have letters. I've seen letters back and forth from servicemen. Edgar, a lot of the people who was in his study groups in the late 30s, a lot were in the Army and the Navy.
Yeah.
And so it's been really interesting to see how they took the work and used it to deal with such traumatic situations.
Yes.
It's been really fascinating.
And I remember hearing in Hugh Lynn's account that when Edgar was saying goodbye to his son, to his sons, and to these young men that he had been the Sunday school teacher for, that he knew which ones were going to die and which ones were going to come back. And so that must have been really, really hard. I think he knew that both of his sons were going to come back. And I think one of these, it's either David Kahn, I think it was David Kahn, who was told by Edgar Casey that he was going to survive the war. And David said it was like, he was doing all kinds of risky stuff because he said, Edgar Casey said I'm going to survive. And everybody's like, no, you got to be more careful. And it would have been funny if he came back and talked to Edgar. He said, no, that was for your brother. I didn't have no idea if you were what. But those are great stories.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if we've got some questions. Let's question about your upcoming presentation. That's right. So tomorrow, as part of the Edgar Casey Immersion Summit, the Call of the Soul, you're going to be doing a presentation. Share us, if you can, share a little bit about the focus of that talk that you'll have.
Yeah. So I'm basically going to really immerse our participants in that conference into the archives. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of materials that have never been digitized before, that we've been seeing.
So is the camera going to go with you in the archives? Or is it you static, or is it a little bit of both?
I'll be talking with you, and then on the screen we'll have
the pictures of the things.
good
oh,
images.
Great.
So I'm going to be showing the physical copy of a reading, what it looks like in the archive. Kind of go through the the notes, the margins, like how why it's structured the way it is.
Yes.
A lot of different documents related to the people in the archive that aren't in the readings collection but in the other smaller collections, and basically kind of give everybody a glimpse into the everyday lives of the people that we read about so much about this work, and kind of
that sounds great. That sounds really good. And that's going to be available live tomorrow.
Yep.
But then it's also going to be available on demand.
It will
so
be
if people
as
can't
well.
catch it tomorrow. Now, is part of catching it tomorrow live, is there going to be a question and answer possibility, or is that if you got questions, ask them today?
Yeah, if you have questions, if you go to edgarcaseyfoundation.org, which is the archives website, we have a Contact Us tab. And so
that
if
goes
you have
to you.
Yep, it goes straight to me. So
Oh,
if you have
okay.
questions now or after the presentation, feel free to send me a message and I'll answer.
Now, I remember back in the real ancient days when people used to leave their house and actually come to the A.R.E. physically. They used to be able to go on tours of the foundation. Is there like a video tour of that? Has one been made where since people can't at this time physically come to tour the archives, is there some kind of a virtual tour that's available?
Not presently, but that's definitely something we could do.
I think that
and
would be great.
Yeah, even through the ECF YouTube channel.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, just have somebody follow you with a camera.
Yeah,
and I know that I remember the ECF. It used to be in this vault in the basement of the hospital, and that's it's used for an office now or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's an office.
And then it moved to the headquarters building, and now with the construction that happened, I don't know how many years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, you've got quite a nice space. You've probably outgrown it by now, but it's quite a nice. It seems like an ample space that you have there.
Yeah, we have a great office and reading room area for researchers to stay, and a storage room, and we recently replaced the shelving with mobile archival shelving. So it's really fun. You know, it's the ones with the cranks, and it's on a track system.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I gotta go over there.
Yeah, so we actually added a third more space.
Yeah.
Than we did. So I have plenty of room for, for new additions in the future.
Well, I put a vote in there for a virtual tour. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, we could definitely get that together.
To have that. So let's see if there's any other questions. None just yet. Good. Well, we'll keep talking. So if you're watching live, if you have some questions about the archives, just about this Edgar Cayce Foundation and anything that we've been talking about, feel free to jump on and ask a question. So let's see what else we could talk about. So what did you, when your father presented you as, hey, look, this A.R.E. place is hiring, what was your thought? Like, how did that process go for you from seeing the advertisement to applying, and what convinced you to accept the position?
Yeah, so it was really, really exciting for me because usually in the archives field, it is very hard to get full-time positions. I think we're all pretty familiar with the field of public history, museums, and archives. It's a lot of it is grant funded, so it can be difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited about the opportunity to come and to design a program and do outreach and just everything that I was so excited about doing in school. So I applied, I believe, in probably late February, March of 2018, still wrapping up my grad school stuff. I also applied to the State Museum in Nashville, Tennessee, to do an educator position.
Is that where you're from? Is that where your background?
Actually from New York originally.
Oh, okay.
Long Island, yeah. Yeah, but I lived in Tennessee for a while, in the Knoxville area. And so my background really has been, both archives and museums. When I was starting out, actually was interested in being a museum curator. So I worked at a Victorian house for a while, giving tours, stuff like that. And I've been a historical reenactor for over 10 years now.
What kind of reenactor?
Historical reenactor.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
how cool.
yeah.
Like me.
Yeah. Yeah, so at a state park down in Tennessee is an 18th century site.
Ah.
And so I could really...
I sense a past life.
Maybe so. Yeah, really when I'm in my 18th century clothing, it doesn't feel like a costume, which just, it feels so natural.
Yeah.
So I could go either way, really.
Yeah.
And so having an internship at a county clerk's office in 2015 really cemented that plan for me.
Yeah.
I just found it so fun and so fascinating. It's like I knew that's the route I wanted to take. And so so I got the interview and
so I didn't know that. So kind of this is a plum job. So there's not that many positions for full-time archivists, and I guess I guess the hurdle would be the kind of the belief system of the archivist saying, oh, I don't know if I want to work with this woo-woo stuff, or just kind of being open to it and saying, wow, there's a lot of documentation. And in some ways, I guess you had been, it's already on your mind with working, studying spiritualism. And where did that interest come from? How did you end up wanting to focus on spiritualism when you got to pick a thesis?
Well, I've always loved ghost stories growing up when I was little.
Okay.
Going up to Colonial Williamsburg when I was small, and we would go to the ghost tours, at night. And I loved going through there at night. I remember being about 6, and the tour guide let me hold the lantern
Yeah.
from the group.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's, yeah, so I've always loved that.
Have you had
kind of
any
thing.
mystical experiences that you can't explain logically, or any other way? Like you ever seen an apparition or anything like that?
Like I've seen one or two things at the time that I can't really explain.
I see. So that you did
Yeah.
have some kind of mystical or kind of unusual experience that opened your
Yeah.
mind to this isn't. You had the curiosity, but then you had some tangible.
Yeah, I've always kept an
experience.
open mind.
Yeah.
I feel like that we don't understand everything
Yeah.
that's going on
Yeah.
in the world. So I definitely keep an open mind with that. And
Yeah.
and then I'm a really voracious reader,
Yeah.
and so I read a lot of really for fun, reading a lot of the spiritualist publications. I was just just fascinated how they tied in this phenomena they were reporting into their actual lives, into social movements, and some of them were very much keeping to their Christian identity and trying to folding spiritualism into that.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people, Ella Wheeler Wilcox is one of them. She wrote extensively, wrote a lot of poetry as well, but she took spiritualism and kind of made her own religious understanding out of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, my great grandmother, who was like my grandmother, she lived to be 107, and she was in the Caribbean, a Puerto Rican tradition of spiritualism, which was very much meshing together with Christianity. So I remember Doña Chere was what we call her. She had like a little altar, and on the altar was the crucifix and the saints and that sort of thing. So it was very much seen as incorporating Christianity, Christian values. But she could see and communicate with, like Edgar Casey could, like discarnates.
Yeah, and it was really interesting too. It was so tied into the women's movement in the 19th century.
Because most of them were women.
Yeah, so if you were a medium, I mean, you would be able to travel the country as a speaker, have a career, have a source of income, teach at, they're called lyceums. Some spiritualists would set up schools and church meetings and that sort of thing. So it was like a career avenue for a lot of women.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
I know Lilydale has kept that. There's that spiritualist community that's there. Seems to be thriving.
Yeah, there's Lilydale, New York, and then Camp Chesterfield in Indiana as well, with a similar sort of thing.
Oh, I hadn't heard of that one.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I think this has been a fascinating conversation. And so just remember that you can tune in tomorrow to catch live. What's the name again of the Call of the Soul conference that's going live tomorrow? And then you can catch it on demand. And then be sure to write Jessica and ask her to put together that archival virtual reality tour. Just a little plug there. So thank you. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very
Great.
welcome. We're really lucky to have you here.
Well, thank
and
you
it's
so much.
it's such a breath of fresh air. It's so nice to see this component of the work that's blossoming in a way that it certainly hasn't I haven't known of in my time here. So thank you for that, and hope we have you back for a second conversation.
Yeah, that'd be
soon.
wonderful. Definitely.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in.